Fáilte go video uair. Most people have heard of the Highland Games, but do you know their ancient connection to Scotland? Welcome to my Lingo Kingdom. I am Carl, and this is where I talk about learning the languages of the Isles, Nihongo, Cymraeg, and Gaidhlig. When most people think of the Highland Games, or the Geamannan Gàidhealach, on Gaidhlig, they probably think of a man in a kilt throwing a tree trunk. But there's a lot more to the Geamannan Gàidhealach than the famous caber toss. More on that in a bit. I was discussing the games with my friend Tommy Mackay, who is a heritage writer for the Scotsman newspaper, and he recently wrote an article about the rich cultural heritage of the Highland Games, and it made me wonder, where did the Highland Games actually come from? So, what we now call the Highland Games evolves from a lot of different ancient sources. Some of it comes from these ancient Irish games from the Kingdom of Dalriada. Some of it comes from the Braemar Gathering established by Challam Chin Bór, or King Malcolm III, so that he could select the most fit and capable messengers and soldiers. The Braemar Gathering, by the way, is still held today and is even attended by the royal family. So the earliest version of a Highland game that starts to resemble what we're used to is the Scottish Highland Games, which was established in 1314 by Robert the Bruce himself in Scottish near Fife, in order to honor the local townsfolk who had participated in the Battle of Bannockburn. So that Highland Games has been going on for over 700 years. Wow. Sinuhain. Speaking of the caber toss, or Chimdig Achapid, on Gaidhlig, my friend Tommy Mackay also made an interesting connection, and that is that the word in English, caber, and also the Scots word for caber, which can normally just mean a beam of wood, can actually have a different meaning in Gaelic. In Gaelic, this can also mean antler, like on a stag. And what is a stag but one of the ancient symbols of Scotland? The games across Scotland were shut down after the Jacobites were defeated and Gaelic culture was suppressed. But decades later, after the Acts of Proscription was rolled back, and monarchs like King George IV and Queen Victoria showed an interest and even an approval of the games, they were quickly revived and more artistic and musical aspects were incorporated so that they resemble more of like what we see today. And this Victorian revival of the Highland Games even influenced the rest of the world, because the guy who invented the modern Olympics, Baron de Coubertin, after he saw a Highland event, he took the hammer toss and shot put events from that Highland event in 1889 and then added them to the Olympic Games. So the reason we have those sports in the Olympic Games are because they came from the Highland Games. As the Scottish diaspora grew, the tradition of the games spread around the world, and now the Geamannan Gàidhealach is basically everywhere. You can go to Australia, Canada, New Zealand, anywhere, and basically find some type of Highland Games. And if you go to a Highland Games today, you're likely to see a lot more than just athletics, too. You'll see gathering of clans, you might see sheep herding, you'll see dansig, píparach, and maybe even the infamous haggis hurling. So mash that like button if you would like to go to a Highland Games, or would like to go again if you've already been. And if you want to learn more about the game's rich heritage and connection to Scotland, then click the link below to read the article at The Scotsman by Tommy Mackay. And finally, I recently went to a Highland Games near my hometown, and I asked a bunch of people if they had any Gaelic. So if you want to see what they said, you can watch that right here.